Okay.
Hey everybody, let's get started. We're getting started in here with our class. Thanks to those of you who are joining us. It's so good to see you. Yes, please. Yes, of course. So who do we have with us virtually? Sheila and Cheryl. Sheila.
Text my mom. I think she's going to.
Wonderful. Okay, and some more people. Wonderful, wonderful.
Oh, she is? Okay, I was trying to text and see if she.
Okay. So thank you all for joining me in this spotlight series to discuss one of my favorite subjects, which is poetry. One moment. Is it?
You want to join us?
So sorry. Thank you so much. Okay. But thank you for joining me to discuss poetry and Jewish text. It's sort of my favorite intersection of things. I don't know how many of you read poetry, write poetry, love poetry, hate poetry. I'd love to hear some of your experiences with it. I know people feel very strongly about it because it's not always such an accessible medium. And just sort of, for those who are in the room and those who are on Zoom, I'd love to know, a little bit about your experience with poetry. Is anyone like a real poetry lover in here?
My daughter writes poetry.
Your daughter likes poetry? Okay.
She writes it. And
she writes it.
Yeah, she's even
beautiful.
Won contests for it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. And what else?
I do like poetry. I also like things in translation, and I've liked the things that you have read in your sermons recently. So it's interesting.
Thank you. Well,
I do like the translation stuff. So.
Yeah.
To translate it.
No, I'm with you all. I like poetry. I love poetry. I have dabbled in it, and I write sometimes when I can. But what I've always loved about poetry ever since I was a little girl is that it communicates deep truths so effectively, so directly, because it's so intentional about each and every word and how it's phrased and how the lines are broken up. There are no mistakes in poetry. And I think in so much writing that we read these days, whether it's posts online or hastily sort of assembled pieces of writing, it can be careless, it can be simplistic, it can be beautiful, it can be all of those things. But I find that with poetry, it's never simplistic, it's never careless. It's always communicating something incredibly powerful and intentional.
But you have to have a knowledge of the language in order to appreciate it.
Yes.
So I used to read a lot of poetry, but in Hebrew.
Yeah.
And since I came to this country, it's not the same thing.
That's a huge point here, is that it can be so inaccessible, even for native English speakers, because part of what poetry is doing is it's invoking. This word is meant to invoke this style of poetry or this piece of literature or this part of popular culture. And it's not an obvious reference so much of the time. You have to really dig into it, and it can be inaccessible. So for language purposes, it can be incredibly tough, and people stay away from poetry a lot of the time for that reason.
I think I got to appreciate it more when I took a linguistics course.
Yeah.
Because there they showed us the impact of every word.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yes.
There's like a double meaning.
Yes.
In every word.
Exactly. It is so powerful in that way. And when you're led through it in studies in linguistics in a class, I think you can access that deeper meaning, which is sort of true for Jewish text as well. That's one of the crossovers that I really love, is that Jewish texts can also feel inaccessible for all of these reasons, that there are layers and layers and layers within Jewish prayer, which is, often they're poems. Jewish liturgy is full of poetry and with words that are referencing Tanakh and Talmud, and you have to be aware of all of the references to really understand what you're doing. And so hopefully in the coming weeks we can really unpack some of these poems and prayers together, to look at poetry and traditional Jewish texts side by side and really pick it apart. I had a different plan for us for our first class. It was sort of coming off of the holiday of Sukkot, Simchat Torah. There are incredible poems, but it just didn't quite feel right this week. And so with everything happening in Israel, I know for so many of us, we're not we're not in a place to think about peace. That's not where we are. That's not where it's going to be a while before we can access that again. But Jews are always thinking about peace. We're always hoping for peace. Our daily liturgy, we talk about peace again and again and again, and we are hoping for peace as soon as we can find it. And hopefully we can access that hope today in class, even if so many of us aren't really there yet. But this first poem that I want to explore with you, that you have shared on your screen, is the first poem on your page. It was written over 40 years ago by Yehuda Amichai, who is one of Israel's most famous poets from the 20th century. He is one of my absolute favorite poets. He grew up in a religious household with a religious background, and so much of his work is based in that, is steeped in Jewish text and tradition, and we're going to see that today. There are all of these references to Tanakh, and he was asked to read from his work at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremonies in Oslo in 1994. And this is the poem that he chose to read. And it's also the poem that, if you were at the Israel rally a couple of days ago, it's the poem Rabbi Scott Rowland read. And it's also, it's one of my favorites. It's really striking. And so we're going to read through it together, and then we're going to pick it apart. That's part of what we're going to do here, because there is a lot in it. If anyone would like to read for us some of this poem, all of this poem, we're going to come back and really look at it. But I'd love if someone would volunteer to read. Anyone interested?
Is Zoom okay?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Wild Peace by Yehuda Amichai. Not the peace of a ceasefire, not even the vision of the wolf and the lamb, but rather, as in the heart when the excitement is over and you can talk only about a great weariness. I know that I know how to kill. That makes me an adult. And my son plays with a toy gun that knows how to open and close its eyes and say, Mama. A peace without the big noise of beating swords into plowshares, without words, without the thud of the heavy rubber stamp. Let it be light, floating, like lazy white foam. A little rest for the wounds. And the howl of the orphans is passed one generation to the next, as in a relay race. The baton never falls. Let it come like wildflowers, suddenly, because the field must have it. Wild peace.
Thank you so much for reading that so beautifully.
This is so appropriate for tonight, for now.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
I
that it's so appropriate.
I know. That's how I feel about so much that I'm
But
reading.
they're talking about the peace, for example. Let it be light, floating, like lazy white foam. That's exactly what we're really hoping for. In other words, we don't want to take over Gaza. We want a peace.
Yeah.
We want others to worry about it. We just want them to stop killing us.
Right. It's sort of what is the question that's, I mean, we can talk about what's being talked about here, but what kind of peace are we looking for? What kind of peace do our bodies need right now? Because there are different kinds of peace that he's talking about in this poem. Are there, before we dive into it, because we're going to go through it stanza by stanza, are there other reactions? Other initial reactions to this poem?
I think some of the contradictions are really interesting because you don't think that peace is wild. You think that peace is peaceful, but it's, I mean, wild peace is the title, and the wildflowers, I don't know, it just is interesting. It's really striking to see the opposites.
Yeah. The title, the very title, wild peace, and the concept of wild peace. And of course, bar, right, in Hebrew, it's right, whenever we're talking about wild animals, wild flowers, it's sort of this natural wild thing. But it's also this word that feels weird to put with peace. It does. Ruth.
I'm looking at the last verse about the cry of the orphans, that we carry it from one generation to the other. I have a hard time today anyways.
I know. I know. And I just want to say, I'm so sorry. I know we are all in a place where we're easily triggered by what we're seeing and reading, and we're feeling so much pain. And this is a painful poem. It's painful because we're in a painful time, and it feels, especially talking about orphans right now is just incredibly devastating. It's devastating.
Chilling.
It's chilling because of how relevant and real this is for us in this moment. And this concept also, we'll come back to this stanza of Lador Vador. For this is heartbreaking. Yeah. But this is again how he uses Amichai so brilliantly, uses tradition, Lador Vador. We have other biblical references in here to communicate the opposite of what that originally meant. Lador Vador is not about passing down, the pain of orphanhood. That's not what it is. It's the opposite. It's about connection to family and continuation. And he's putting these things, these really brilliantly together.
This might be a weird thing, but when I look at the Shalom Bar and think of the opposites, that it's, maybe Shalom Rav is the opposite.
Oh, well, that's very interesting, right? If you opposite and even just reversing the word, or right? Shalom Bar, Shalom Rav. That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
That's something from linguistics, actually. But
that is.
I wonder if he realized what he.
Oof. And if
you write these things, you don't even realize what you're writing.
No.
But that is wild.
Wild. That is bar.
Yeah, but I wonder. Bar and Rav.
Yes. I really wonder. I mean, he was so brilliant. I imagine he had to know a little bit of what he was doing here. But that's why it's so important. Again, I mean, we have the English and we have the Hebrew, and the Hebrew carries so much within it that we don't get when we just read the English. And so you are noticing in the Hebrew these linguistic things that's really important. And Shalom Bar and Shalom Rav, I think that is what an observation. And we pray for Shalom Rav every day, right? And so what does it mean to pray for this sort of inverse of that? Shalom Bar. A wild peace rather than a great peace, a wide peace. It's very interesting.
It's almost an oxymoron. Wide and peace.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. We're saying it's an oxymoron, Helena said. It's wild and peace. Again, these words that just feel so opposite, but really what Amichai is doing is showing us how they come together and intertwine in natural ways. But to us, with language, it feels off. Yeah.
No, there's a constant everything in like every sentence, every other sentence. He starts with something like beating and
Yes.
thuds and
Yes.
the wolf, and then it's always tempered.
Yes.
Like
It's
then
always tempered.
it's the wolf. It sounds like you must have listened to your husband this morning at Midrash when we were talking about the roaring of the lion. And again,
Oh.
and it's funny, this seems to match it. But you have
That's
a
funny.
ceasefire. Even the word ceasefire is like
Yes. Let's
Bod and Rav.
Yes, cease fire. Right. Putting these things together, you're right.
Well, let's look at the Hebrew.
Let's look at
Shvita Neshech.
check. Right. Let's look.
Shvita is Shvita is also a strike, isn't it?
Yeah, but Shvitat Neshek, it's the quiet
Yeah.
after you see the bombardment
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, and you're used to this bombing and bombing and bombing all the time, and all of a sudden, quiet.
Shvita, yeah, because Neshech is ammunition.
And you don't know if it will come back or not.
It's a pause. And I mean, look at the root of that word. What is the root of that word?
Which one?
Shvitat, Lashevet,
is
Shabbat,
Shevet.
Shabbat.
Shabbat.
It's got the root of Shabbat in it, right? It's this pause there. And then those two words, that quiet after the storm, connected with Neshek. So let's look at that verse, not the peace of a ceasefire. What is the peace of a ceasefire? Because he's saying that's not what he
It might
wants.
not be lasting.
Exactly. You don't know when it will start again and who will break it.
You don't know when it will be broken. It's not a lasting peace. It's a halt. Are there other thoughts from Zoom? What is the peace of a ceasefire that he doesn't want?
The weariness.
He wants it to continue.
He
Yeah.
no.
He wants it to continue, and it's not.
The peace to continue.
Ceasefire is not enough because it doesn't last. It's a ceasefire that's going to lead to killing and all, and beating swords. It's like wolf and lamb, and beating swords into plowshares. Those are the contrasts.
Yes. Right. But he's saying he doesn't even want that. Right. These are all kinds of peace he doesn't want. He doesn't want the peace of a ceasefire, which is a band-aid of peace. Right. It's not actually healing the wound. And he doesn't want not even the vision of the wolf and the lamb. So let's talk about that vision of yes, go ahead.
Wait, Rabbi?
Yeah.
I'm interpreting that differently, which is with the wolf and the lamb. What he's saying is he doesn't want it, so there was a war or a fight first. Because the wolf and the lamb weren't getting along and then get along. You have a ceasefire when there was an altercation or a battle first. I think what he's saying is he just wants peace without the opposite first.
Right. Well,
and that's why there's no big noise of beating swords into plowshares, because the swords weren't involved.
Yeah. So I think you're getting at something that's absolutely true in this, which is that there is something loud and violent that he wants to be far away from. The peace he wants is far away from that. It's not that it didn't happen, because he's living in a world where it's happening, right? He knows it's happening. And so what kind of peace is he hoping for? He's looking to be long after that moment of where you can remember what it was like to have been in the fight. He wants, right? This next line here, as in the heart, when the excitement is over and you can only talk about a great weariness. You can only talk about being so exhausted. You don't even remember what it was like to be full of passion and rage and hate and all of those other feelings that come with war and terror, and he wants to be long past that.
I think also he wants it to be, the wolf and the lamb is not something natural, and it's not. So I think he wants it to be like wildflowers, because that is natural and that's growth. The wolf and the lamb are getting along. That's not the normal order of things, and it doesn't move things forward. But wildflowers in a field growing is, it's growth and it's continuing nature. It's not something that just happens to happen like a wolf and a lamb.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. I don't know if did everyone hear that?
Yeah.
On Zoom? Fair. Because there was there are some end of days images here, and I want to talk about what they are. This wolf and the lamb being one of them, sort of this ultimate image of peace that we have in Jewish text. And we're going to look at that text now, because it's important to look at the references while we're moving along. But the wild peace is a naturally occurring concept. The peace is natural, wild is natural, and the wolf and the lamb not being natural. That is really interesting. So where does the wolf and the lamb, do you know what's being referenced here?
Yeah.
Yeshayahu.
Yeah.
Yes, Isaiah. And I'm going to scroll down. There are a couple Isaiah moments that reference this kind of, this kind of vision with the wolf and the lamb. I kind of want to read through both of them. This one is also, just for this moment, feels so brutal and so accurate and real. But I'd like to read through them both. I think they're both good references for what this end of days, ultimate peace, messianic age of peace looks like in our tradition. Does anyone want to read? I know it's a long piece here. I want to read both of these Isaiah pieces. Anyone open to reading? I'm happy to do it. Okay, Sheila, go ahead.
Unless someone else, okay. For behold, I am creating a new heaven and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered. They shall never come to mind. Be glad then and rejoice forever in what I am creating. For I shall create Jerusalem as a joy and her people as a delight. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in her people. Never again shall be heard there the sounds of weeping and wailing. No more shall there be an infant or gray beard who does not live out their days. The one who dies at 100 years shall be reckoned a youth, and the one who fails to reach 100 shall be reckoned accursed. They shall build houses and dwell in them, and they shall plant vineyards and enjoy their fruit. They shall not build for others to dwell in, or plant for others to enjoy. For the days of my people shall be as long as the days of a tree. My chosen ones shall outlive the work of their hands. They shall not toil to no purpose. They shall not bear children of terror, but they shall be a people blessed by the Lord, and their offspring shall remain with them. Before they pray, I will answer. While they are still speaking, I will respond. The wolf and lamb shall graze together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and the serpent's food shall be earth. In all my sacred mount, nothing evil or vile shall be done, said the Lord. This is interesting, but the lion and the ox.
I know.
If there's the wolf and the lamb, okay,
Yeah.
opposites. But the lion and the ox may be quiet, but he's strong. The lion is strong.
Well, it seems to be about what it's interesting. Are they paired with their opposites, or is it just this list of the lion, won't be a carnivore. The lion, strong like the ox will there won't be any violence coming from this strong creature, just like the ox and, all of these unnatural things will sort of happen. The serpent's food will be earth.
Well, that's a reference to Gan Eden.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Right. You have a couple references to Gan Eden. You had, the people will, where was the tree? Hold on. Okay, I cannot find it, but there.
My people shall be, the days of my people shall be as long as the days of a tree.
Long as the days of a tree, right, of a tree,
Six
but
lines
also
up,
there's
6 or
And
7
there's
lines up.
plant vineyards, fruit.
plant, right, vineyards, fruit. There's this original paradise that existed where everything was okay and life was eternal, and and then there's this ultimate paradise of this peaceful place that we're returning to. And in this intermediate space, it's this world of violence and of animals being pit against each other and people being pit against each other. Are anything that you're reacting to from this vision of
It's
an
wild
ultimate peace?
poetry. It's absolutely, we read this and only in the context of reading it in contrast to the other poem, Amchai's
Yeah.
poem. And my God, the contrasts and all in here are magnificent.
They are. A lot of the prophets, I would say, are just incredible poetry, written so lyrically, meant to
They
evoke something.
basically say the same thing.
Yeah,
You're
right.
being punished, you behave, we'll take care of you.
Okay, yes, generally that's the message of the prophets. Any other reactions to this vision of peace? Could be a feeling that this is
Nature.
Utopia.
He uses
Utopia.
nature's in images as the planting,
Yeah.
the grazing, the eating, earth.
Yes, it's very funny. It's this utopian image, and there are all of these natural and throughout the prophets and all of our sort of ultimate images of peaceful times, we get these, images of nature, everything being in harmony and sort of like the human family being at peace, and the natural, the world of natural things being at peace, and everything working in service and in honor of God. And it's this utopian world.
I was
Vision.
doing okay with this until I got to the last line. And when the last line, I think I'm seeing that it's only going to be in this one small little place where the Temple Mount is. It's not everywhere.
No, but the mount, what is that mount? Because it's a small M. I mean, it was just first.
Right. I mean, that's the translation. It's Har Kodeshi, right?
Oh,
The
okay.
whole Har Kodeshi.
So then it's, the Holy Mount. Okay.
It's the Holy Mount. It's you have a lot of our images of sort of peaceful end days. The temple is a part of that image. The temple's a part of that image, and that being God's home on this earth. And it's not that the entire earth isn't enveloped in that. This in most of these images, and we'll get to some of the others, like all of the nations of the world sort of come here and are at peace with one another and are worshiping God in the same way oftentimes, or in their own way. And but it is true that it's sort of localized. It's localized. And of course, sorry.
18 and 19, it's constantly the J's. I mean, this is what I'd have to see through. But they create, whoever translated, Jerusalem is joy. Rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in her people. Delight. It's the same words constantly to try to get the image out.
Right.
And then you have the mount, at the end, the sacred mount.
You do. You do. And you're right. It's the samech in Hebrew. So the J in English, but Sisu, Sasi, Yerushalayim, Lo Yishama. You know, it's using the same sort of letters to evoke a kind of, a kind of feeling and alliteration. And also just know that this sort of era of Isaiah, most of what he's writing is post-exilic, sort of Babylonian exile or coming back from Babylonian exile. And so there is a lot of this, desire for a rebuilt Jerusalem in that moment. I mean, always, but especially in that moment. And so when we're reading this last line about at the sacred mount, it's sort of this image of coming together at a time when they were far away and kept away from their holy land. I see a hand, Tybal.
So I just looked up the date of the Amachai poem, which is 1971. Is that what you have?
That 1971. Hold on.
Because I'll tell you why. I think
yes, it is.
Let me tell you why it really, really matters. Because one of the powerful things that Israel did as a society and a young society that got it actually academic attention is it changed culture through a public relations campaign about not picking wildflowers. And that campaign was in the 1960s. Actually, I meant to do this, IF. You can see this is actually stamps. The virtual background that I just put up is stamps that commemorated this not picking wildflowers campaign, because the wildflowers were disappearing from Israel and it was this huge thing. And as I say, all these things. So the fact that Amachai wrote the poem after the successful wildflowers campaign, it's really a coded symbol of the power of the culture and the ability to change and all sorts of other things.
I love that. Thank you for bringing that context, because that's this other thing that we're seeing throughout this poem, and throughout our text, right? This, if peace and rebuilding can happen in nature, then it can happen with us, right? That there's this connection between us and the natural world. And that's really wonderful. Thank you. Just before we go back to the poem, this is the other reference that talks about the wolf and the lamb. It's another classic one that Isaiah brings earlier in Isaiah. I'll just read it really quickly, but it's sort of more of this, this unnatural, animal relations that, this end of days, animals are all peaceful with one another. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard lie down with the kid, the calf, the beast of prey and the fatling together with a little boy to herd them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together. And the lion, like the ox, shall eat straw. Again, the lion and the ox. A babe shall play over a viper's hole, and an infant pass its hand over an adder's den. In all of my sacred mount, nothing evil or vile shall be done. That line comes back. For the land shall be filled with devotion to God as water covers the sea.
What's interesting, then this is repeating the previous.
Well, this comes before. This comes before.
All right, it comes before, but it's the same
yes
thing, and usually things are not repeated. By the way,
it's
you know that we have that mural in the sanctuary, the lion and the lamb, and
yeah it is
the lamb, as
interesting.
my husband says, it looks like a rat.
Yeah, I wonder, it's a good question, and there are lots of ways you can go with answering that question. Why is there repetition within Isaiah? I mean, there's a lot of critical scholarship about what Isaiah spans so much time. It seems, we can talk about that. Who is Isaiah and when was he writing? And is it just one Isaiah? There are two Isaiahs that we generally talk about, Isaiah 1, Isaiah 2. And scholars generally think there may have been two prophets who were doing this.
I think one of these is chapter 65 and one's chapter 11. I think one is Isaiah 1 and the other one is Isaiah 2.
It is. This one is Isaiah 1 here. And this one is Isaiah 2. There is also maybe a third. But it's sort of up for debate. But it's a good question. And you do see a lot of repetition in the prophets. I think you see the same images evoked. I think it speaks to people in a certain way. And the prophets are trying to communicate something effectively, right? What's the goal of a prophet? It's a good question. They're trying to get through. And so they're lyrical and they're using this powerful language, and repetition also helps us with getting a message through. So this is part of what is informing Amichai in his not even the vision of a wolf and a lamb, and what kind of peace is he wanting. And he says then, right, so the peace he's wanting is this peace when the excitement is over and you can only talk about a great wariness. Achara hitrakshu, after the great excitement, after all of the feelings that come with wartime, all of the, excitement it's a hard word, but it's, all of the feelings, all of the strong feelings that come with it, and the heightened nature of it all. He wants to be exhausted. He wants to be so tired and not vigilant anymore.
Yeah, התרגשות is the adrenaline.
Yes.
And then after the adrenaline, you have a sense of weariness.
Right. That's our doctor. Yeah. Right. That's what he's wanting. He's wanting the post-adrenaline, just being able to speak to the experience of weariness, because when you're in it, you don't even remember what the adrenaline felt like. And then he says this here: I know that I know how to kill. That makes me an adult, mevugar. Lachen ani mevugar. That makes me mature. That makes me an adult. And my son plays with a toy gun that knows how to open and close its eyes and say, "Mama."
That's a contrast.
It's a reference like to a doll. Girls used to have dolls that opened and closed their eyes and said, "Mama."
Wow.
So the gun is a reference to a doll.
Oh, thank you, because I had a hard time understanding that. Wow.
But
Or any other child.
the boys were playing with the gun and the girls were playing with the dolls who open and close their eyes.
Yeah.
Reference to children in general.
It's right. It's actually, there's this heartbreaking thing happening here we should talk about what it means that he says, I'm an adult, I know how to kill, and that makes me an adult. And we have, unfortunately,
the innocence of the childhood.
Yes.
And I think that the child is playing with something that they don't even know is dangerous, just like playing with a viper or playing with a
doll that says mommy.
He's playing with it as if it's a toy, or they don't know that it's a danger.
Right.
Sounds like those
That's like a wolf and the lamb. If you want to look at it that way.
Yeah.
The wolf is the
Right,
adult
Right.
who knows how to kill, and the lamb is the little kid who's playing around.
Yes.
And what does the lamb would say ba, right? No.
The lamb would say ba, yes.
No, not mama, baba. Okay.
Right. Oh, there's so much that's been said. I want to hear. Also, we've got some people who I'd love to hear from, who I don't see on screen, but I know you're there. But this loss of innocence, right? Because if we think about it, knowing how to kill, unfortunately, we have too many children who know how to kill, and that makes them adults far earlier than they should be. Adults need to be adults, but they unfortunately they have to grow into that much earlier than they should. And so knowing how to kill it dissolves that innocence. This contrast between adulthood and childhood here, and what it means for a child to play with a toy gun, almost as not practice, but knowing that that's where, if we're talking about Lador Bador, and that's what they're inheriting, right? Any other reactions to this piece here? I know that I know how to kill. That makes me an adult. And my son plays with a toy gun. And then now we know the context that there's this toy that opens and closes its eyes and says mama, that the girls would play with.
But it's interesting that it's a son and a toy gun. In other words, it's because he could just as well have said played with a doll. Today we would say my son and use the word doll, possibly.
Well, I think we're
And
being very,
and a kid, a son plays with a gun.
but I think we're being very intentional here about the son playing with the gun, you know, that the father knows how to use the gun, the son is playing with the gun, and that gun is in this child's future, even though he doesn't know it and he's just playing. And there's this sort of innocence. There's an innocence there with this, you know, the gun that knows how to open and close its eyes and say, mama. It's just this striking image. What are you?
So is there some kind of like generational or familial thing or something with thinking of the four sons and the Hache no Yodeli Shol, but the one, you know, I know that I know. So the father knows.
Yeah.
The son doesn't even know. They don't know how to ask. They don't know how to, I mean, they do, but hopefully they don't know how to use a gun, you know, doesn't know the impact of using this gun because he's using it as a toy, but sort of does.
But the gun knows.
The gun knows, but the child doesn't.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying, he repeats that word no.
You're right. The gun here is personified.
I mean, there are other toys that are, I just pulled up a picture because for totally other context, but it's a bus. There are Fisher Price toys that have, you know, eyes that blink and talk like I think there used to be the toy telephone, but.
Wow. Yeah. It's funny. I think, right, we have these toys. We know that there are toys that are personified, that have eyes, that speak, that are meant to be, right? Like dolls are meant to, you know, you feel like it's a child, or you feel like you're taking care of a real thing. You know, you make believe that. And guns too, you make believe that you're playing with something real, even when you know it's not. That's part of what's happening here. Okay, the next piece here, a piece without the big noise of beating swords into plowshares. Without words, without the thud of the heavy rubber stamp. Okay, though there is a lot already in this, just packed. A piece without the big noise of beating swords into plowshares. What is that referencing?
Peace. That's what.
In the beginning of the verse.
וכיתתו חרבותם לעתים.
Yes. Yes.
But I think it's connected to the word שביתת נשק. When you negotiate with your enemy about peace, and you decide you'll beat your swords into plowshares, etc. And we talk and we use a stamp. I don't want all that. I want it to be easy, float on top, that will give rest to the wounds.
Yes.
Without talking, without all those negotiations. Exactly.
This isn't an easy piece here, right? The big noise. That's an incredible image. Rash, it's the sound of this big noise of beating swords into plowshares, the big noise. And we say this line every week. We say this line to talk about peace, and it's, you know, it comes off as such a powerful line. It is a powerful line, but he's talking about the big noise of this process of turning a weapon into a tool for growth and peace. And so I just want to take a look at that reference now. So again, we love Isaiah. It's just more Isaiah from earlier on. And let's just take a look at this so that we know what we're talking about. Does anyone want to read for us? Anyone who hasn't read yet?
I can read.
Great, thank you, Cheryl.
In the days to come, the mount of God's house shall stand firm above the mountains and tower above the hills, and all the nations shall gaze on it with joy. And the many people shall go and say, Come, let us go up to the mount of God, to the house of the God of Jacob, that we may be instructed in God's ways, and that we may walk in God's paths. For instruction shall come forth from Zion, the word of God from Jerusalem. Thus God will judge among the nations and arbitrate for the many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not take up sword against nation. They shall never again know war.
Yeah. Our classic line. And this is too loud for Yehuda Amichai. It's too loud. And it's
almost like
interesting.
having like in a divorce case, it's like having it in front of a court,
Yeah.
to decide, and just arbitrating it, which here you have the word arbitrate, judge
Yes.
and arbitrate. In other words, let's talk about it. Let's shake hands on it. We don't need to have the formal paper because that doesn't do any good.
Right.
Oh God, this is so relevant today. It's
I know.
terrible.
It
Because
is.
that's exactly what they're talking about in terms of peace. There are people who are talking about, okay, what are we going to do afterwards?
Yeah.
And they are also, and it's not a case, the judgment would be that Israel would take over Gaza. The arbitration would be, which is what they really will want, is to let the Arabs rule the country and take over responsibility for it, because Israel doesn't want it. So it's interesting, the contrast. If you think today in the newspapers, hey, you got it right there. And that's the beauty of this whole, of the Bible.
I know.
That nothing's changed.
Right? You have this age-old wisdom that continues to be so relevant. And here it's this, you don't ever think about, just this line that beating swords into plowshares, that is hard. That's not a quick thing. That's hard. And so how do you even go about transforming weapons into tools of creation and production? And
So you recycle.
yeah, you recycle.
Recycle.
Yeah,
That's what they are
Reuse,
doing.
you reuse.
it's recycling.
You use it for
repurposing.
different things.
This is just being responsible.
Where,
It reminds me of, that line, or now when I look at it, when I would, on trips, I would visit Sderot. I mean, often trips to Israel take you to Sderot. And they had that store where they would show all of these, pieces of jewelry and art that were repurposed rockets that were, made into art.
Wow.
And
Yeah, very true. I
Wow.
was there.
yeah. It's, swords beat into plowshares. Ugh. So we don't want that. He doesn't want the big noise. He doesn't want the word, so many words that are going to have to be exchanged and gone back on and gone, whatever it is. The words are tedious, and the thud of a heavy rubber stamp, all of the diplomacy, all of the, there's the bureaucracy. He wants light floating like lazy white foam, a little rest for the wounds. Menucha l'pta'im, right? A little rest for the wounds.
You know about this chotamot kvedot?
Yeah.
Because you couldn't get anywhere without having those stamps of visa, running away from the Holocaust.
Yeah.
It's reminds me something about that. You know, how difficult it was to get a visa to come to United States from Europe, or how difficult it was to get a permit to get to Palestine after the war, all those bureaucracies.
That makes safety and security so difficult. You just want to get there. You have all of these things pushing back against you, this heavy rubber stamp that you're waiting for. You're just waiting for permission to be safe where you want to live. And then we get to this harrowing piece. And the howl of the orphans is passed from one generation to the next, as in a relay race. The baton never falls. Midor Lador. We're invoking Lador Vador, which is traditionally, what does that concept mean to us? Lador Vador.
Eternally.
Hold over door, they are trying to annihilate us.
But in our tradition, Lador Vador, the purpose of that concept, that is definitely what's being said here. Lador Vador, this war is being inherited, this massacre, the orphanhood, this, loss and pain is being inherited. But just putting it in contrast with Lador Vador traditionally, what does that mean to us, Lador Vador?
Eternally, forever.
Continuity and enduring.
Eternally, forever. Tybal?
I think it's also, which is handing on tradition to children, like not making a lot of money, not doing whatever, but that our Yerusha is supposed to be the ethical values we hand on, and that's the generation to generation.
So, right. So Lador Vador, the spiritual transmission of who we are as a people, what we want our children to be and be able to do in this world, the continuity of Jewish peoplehood and Jewish tradition. That's what we're getting at, Lador Vador, when we talk about it. We're talking about building us up rather than tearing us apart. And he's using it here so powerfully because of the contrast. To say that we are inheriting this constant being torn apart from our families, from our, it's really striking the way he uses it. And then to put it in the context of a relay race that we hand and it never falls. How does that imagery sit with people?
We hold on to it tightly.
Yes.
We don't let it drop.
Right. We hold on to this trauma that we inherit so tightly. And it doesn't skip a generation. It doesn't skip, right?
And it's constantly going, the relay race, the baton.
Yes.
This is constant motion.
Right. I think about also it's a race. The image is a race, which is, the image of where are we trying to go in this race? What are we trying to, I guess it's a race of us against other competitors, but the image of a race here also is really striking to me. Because it's something that activates you. It's something you don't have a break from. You're constantly panting and trying to catch your breath. There's no moment for you to, as soon as you pass it on to the next generation, that's when you catch your breath, right? That's this relay race image.
When you die, actually.
When you die. Right.
But it continues because it's a relay.
Yes.
You die, but then there are people.
The next generation
Afterwards,
continues.
the next generation.
Yes. Ron?
Yeah, I was looking at this, maybe I missed it. Maybe I'm looking at it differently. I'm thinking that he's complaining about that in every generation there are orphans, and there's never a break from it, that every generation is creating the orphans because of the war. Because
That is what, yeah. Yeah, you're right. That is what's being talked about. That's exactly it. That every generation, and that's what's so striking about this Lador Vador imagery, right? That Lador Vador is about continuity and family and building. And here it's saying we're creating orphans, or, people are being torn apart from their families in every generation. People are being isolated in every generation because of this. And then we come to this final stanza, which is just so powerful. I love it. Let it come like wildflowers suddenly, because the field must have it. Wild peace, Shalom Bar. This last line, what this last stanza, what do we make of this? We're back to this concept of wild peace.
Let it come fast and without, again, this is like the white foam, the light.
Yeah.
In other words, let it just come. Let
Yes.
it grow let it be natural and not forced with a heavy rubber stamp.
Let it be natural, right? We're going back again to that a natural peace. And also, if you think about wildflowers that seem to pop up overnight, he's saying, let's avoid all of the, there's so much that comes with peace. It's so tedious. It takes so long. It takes so much work. It takes all these rubber stamps. It takes all of these words. None of that. Let it just pop up. He's wanting it to pop up overnight because the field demands it. The field needs it.
I think maybe we're also saying that peace is the natural state. War is manufactured. That's not natural.
Ooh. Ooh. Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. To think that peace is just, it's the natural way, and that all of this war, which seems to plague us in every civilization ever, that's unnatural. It's unnatural. And I wonder how we bring on unnatural things, if that's the case.
Usually, before the irrigation systems and stuff like this, used to be nothing. And then if they rain a little bit, really, literally, overnight, all the poppy seeds will bloom, all the flowers, the white flowers. It was like a transformation of the midbar into an oasis.
Just a little water.
There's something, the word bar, again, I don't know what Amichai was thinking, but then this may be far-fetched, but bar is in Arabic is the same as the Arabic for ben, like bar mitzvah, right?
So bar
So
means
it's pirhei ben, in other words, the flowers of youth.
yeah. It's
That word
interesting.
bar is amazing now.
The word bar
Well,
is amazing, and it
his
means
son,
so many
He
things.
talks about his son in here.
Yes, he talks about his children. He talks about children. He talks about his son. Bar does come, it comes with so much meaning.
I wonder if he was thinking, and you never know what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Now, pirchei bar grow on their own. Nobody planted them.
Yes.
I'm looking in the Hebrew English dictionary for korach, that pitom bekorach hasadeh.
Yes.
And it's necessity
Yes.
or compulsion.
Yes. Yes. Right. It's just because the field needs it. It needs it. Right.
Yeah.
It's not that we work so hard to make it grow. It's that the field needs it. I know we're at time, and I don't want to hold you all over. I have another incredible poem at the very end of it. We didn't get to it. But if you do want to look it up, it's a poem called Wage Peace by Judith Hill. She wrote it right after 9/11. It was a response to 9/11. It's a poem that's come back again and again in the context of of Israel. There was an organization that started called Nashim Osot Shalom, based off of this poem. It was the inspiration. It's still an active group in Israel. It's a poem it's come back with Ukraine. It comes back in moments of crisis, and it's about how we wage peace, even when it's not here, even when it feels so far away. How do we look towards a world of peace? So I'm just going to read it and really quickly and just to leave you with that. Wage peace. Oh, I will go to it for you all. Hold on. Wage peace with your breath. Breathe in firemen and rubble. Breathe out whole buildings and flocks of red-winged blackbirds. Breathe in terrorists and breathe out sleeping children and fresh-mown fields. Breathe in confusion and breathe out maple trees. Breathe in the fallen and breathe out lifelong friendships intact. Wage peace with your listening, hearing sirens pray loud. Remember your tools, flower seeds, clothespins, clean rivers. Make soup, play music, memorize the words for thank you in 3 languages. Learn to knit and make a hat. Think of chaos as dancing raspberries. Imagine grief as the outbreath of beauty or the gesture of fish. Swim for the other side. Wage peace. Never has the world seemed so fresh and precious. Have a cup of tea and rejoice. Act as if armistice has already arrived. Celebrate today. And I know that this is, it is hard today. This is not where we are today. And this is part of what she's saying. She wrote this right after 9/11, in response to 9/11. And we are certainly in our own 9/11, you know, on an entirely different scale. We've talked about that. It's just unthinkable to think about this today. But part of what we do as Jews is we breathe out hope. That's what we can do. That's what we have to do. How do we breathe out peace into a world that is filled with so much violence and hatred and vengeance? And that's going to be a part of our next few weeks, months. I don't know how long. But as Jews, I can hear myself echoing. Weird. As Jews, we are a people of peace, and we hope for peace, and we believe in a peaceful messianic age. And the only way to usher that in is for us to bring that about. There's another source I didn't share with you here, but that the Messiah comes when we are bringing about a peaceful era. It doesn't come without us doing that. And so how do we, each in our own way, try to bring more peace to the world, a world that's so broken and horrible and tragic and needs it? And I am praying for wild peace with all of you. So thank you for joining me for this first class. I'm excited to continue learning. Okay, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.